Hi there, hello, salut, bonjour. I hope you're doing very well from wherever you're watching at this moment. As always, it's a rare privilege for me to connect with you as we try to make sense of events happening across the globe, specifically in the Republic of Cameroon, as we continue to keep track following the presidential elections that took place on October 12, 2025. And you know, every day we wake up to new stories. And today I'm going to take you to Meiganga in the north of Cameroon. And just hang tight there. But as always, I want to thank you for continuously sharing this platform within your circles, for subscribing to the channel. You know, I know some of you watch without subscribing because you forget. But please do subscribe because we need to hit that 10,000 mark and move forward to go beyond that. And for those who like, if you like, please make sure you click that like button as soon as you join. And if you have something on your mind, it's always good to communicate and share. So leave your comments and we read them and we take them very seriously. And also don't forget to hit that notification bell so you don't miss a thing as soon as we drop new updates. And speaking of updates, I want to give you a few. First, off the top, we did talk about the death of Anicet Ekane, the aftermath. And as you know, foreign partners responded. The EU responded. And as we speak, the government of Cameroon is not happy. Rene Emmanuel Sadi, the Minister of Communication, came out in a new communique saying that in their view, the EU is acting as though it's trying to interfere in the internal matters of Cameroon. And many observers have already decried that is rich coming from a government that likes to flaunt and show any form of congratulatory message that comes from abroad to show that foreign partners like the EU's and United States of America and so on are in support of the regime. But in this case, visibly the regime in Yaoundé is not happy because the EU was very firm and issued statements that show they want to see a full investigation on the case of Anicet Ekane and also for all those that were arrested in the aftermath of the elections that took place on October 12. And I know many of you have already outlined the fact that you want to see the same kind of amnesty or pardon, or if not total release with no conditions extended to all those who've suffered different abuses of power and authority in Cameroon or who have been arrested because of their opinion and their conscience, that they should be released. We can even go way back as 1990. And like I've said before, there's no reason why someone should be jailed because they think differently and they have a different opinion or they don't belong to the CPDM party. And I've often joked when I say that in Cameroon, if the regime is not after you and you call yourself an opposition leader, you're not an opposition leader because the real opposition in Cameroon is always targeted by the regime. And you can cite a few and you know what they've done to all those who've actually worked hard to show that they are part of an opposition force. And we are championing more of the cause for a civil society that is strong. As you would have noticed on this platform, we champion more causes on civic education, public discourse around good governance, democracy, and also justice, because we do believe that a strong civil society in Cameroon would be able to help those that are managing the affairs of the state stay accountable, and those that are aspiring to govern to know that the path to governance must be that which helps every Cameroonian to benefit from the natural resources and the wealth of the nation, and to also elevate the standard of living of every Cameroonian and make sure that they can bring down the cost of living while maintaining a higher standard for all Cameroonians, because it's long overdue. Other African countries are thriving. Cameroon cannot be the exception. And putting that first update aside, we can tell you that Professor Abao, has been released from detention. And it's questionable that someone like Joachim Chamani, who was also arrested on the same evening when Anicet Ekane was arrested, has been sent to Kondengi, some sort of awaiting trial. Because at this point, there's not been an official record to show exactly what any of them did, but they were all bundled up under the same banner of accusations. And we can also chip in when it comes to the video that is circulating showing the Minister of Territorial Administration, Paul Atanga Nji, in an interview where he's talking about Anicet Ekane. And some say it is in very condescending terms and that it would have been better for the minister to stay quiet rather than try to denigrate the image and the memory of Anicet Ekane, because he made statements like it wasn't necessary for Anicet Ekane to be involved in the matters of the state anymore because they had been warned, or he had personally told him before.
Et je lui ai tenu le langage de la vérité. Anicet, il faut éviter le désordre. Parce que toute votre vie, vous vous êtes arrangé à vous retrouver du mauvais côté de la République. Je lui ai dit, vous n'êtes pas mon ami, vous êtes une connaissance, mais lorsque vous étiez en difficulté, de manière spontanée, je vous ai aidé. Mais de là à dire que pour quelqu'un, parce qu'il est malade, il a participé activement à cette insurrection qui a été vite stoppée, n'est-ce pas, grâce au professionnalisme de nos forces de défense et de sécurité. Et dire que, comme il est malade, il devait être en résidence surveillée, non.
Media analysts and other observers say it would have been preferable for the minister to stay quiet and remain silent rather than come out in an interview and denigrate the memory of Anicet Ekane. Because according to Minister Paul Atanga Nji, Anicet Ekane is not a martyr, neither is he a hero. Because in his view, Anicet Ekane has always been on the wrong side of the Republic and that he's a troublemaker and it wasn't necessary for him to be viewed in any good way. And in a very somewhat surprising fashion, the minister says he is a Christian, and in Christian way, he started off by saying, may the body of Anicet Ekane rest in peace. We would want to believe that that is just a slip of tongue, because in essence, we do know that it's the soul that needs to rest. And if at all, with this outing, the soul of Anicet Ekane would rest, because those things that were said, he wasn't there to defend himself, and they are not to honor his memory, especially for the work he has done for Cameroon. And you would be surprised because, maybe not surprised, because you will see a lot of this happening in Cameroon, where when somebody dies, especially if it's somebody who dies in circumstances that puts the regime in a discomfort, you will have surrogates take to media, grant interviews, and start to say things to water down the person's personality, bring the person's image and memory down, use different terms like, oh, the person was sick, had different illnesses, was a troublemaker, was a never-do-well, all these things. And that is why, like I told you in the last outing, that Cameroon history is so confusing, because we don't know who our heroes are. In a country where there's nobody we can point to who is in a national museum with an effigy that really depicts their greatness. Everybody at some point was reduced to some kind of a maquisard in the days of the UPC party leaders, even when we know of the executions of people like Ernest Wanje and the likes. We even have the former head of state, the first president of Cameroon, who died in exile in Senegal. The corpse has never been returned to Cameroon for proper burial or state burial. And therefore, you have this kinds of situation continue to play out. And here we have Anicet Ekane, and as you can hear from the minister himself, saying things that don't really honor the memory of Anicet Ekane.
Il faut éviter de dire que c'est un martyr ou c'est un héros national. Non, il n'est ni l'un ni l'autre. Il est sur les coups de poursuites judiciaires. Rébellion contre la République, incitation à la haine. Ils ont même financé cette insurrection. Les preuves sont là. Ils ont drogué les enfants. Vous savez, les stupéfiants,
Having touched on some of those updates off the top, it's important for us to now delve into the main subject matter at hand. And we're going to Meiganga, not just as a name on the map, but as a pressure point of this entire post-election crisis. A roadblock that shook a whole national corridor. A slap at a checkpoint that turned into collective anger, and a small town that suddenly reveals the big contradictions of Cameroon. So let's take our time. First, we'll understand what Meiganga is and why it matters. Then we'll walk through what actually happened at that checkpoint. Finally, we'll connect Meiganga to the bigger crisis, the resistance, and the daily life of ordinary people. Stay with me. Where is Meiganga, and why should anyone care? Now, before we talk about roadblocks and gendarmes, we need to answer a simple question. Why should someone in Douala, Bamenda, or in the diaspora care about Meiganga? For starters, Meiganga is not just a town in the Adamawa region of Cameroon. It sits on one of the most strategic roads in Central Africa, the Douala Yaoundé Ngaoundéré Meiganga Garoua Boulay Bangui axis. This is the lifeline for goods going to the Central African Republic. Every single day, trucks carry fuel, food, cement, manufactured goods, and they all snake through Meiganga. Add to that, refugees from the Central African Republic passing through or settling nearby, checkpoints, wait stations, security posts, where the state shows up in uniform. Local people trying to live, farm, trade, send children to school. So when Meiganga is blocked, it's not just a town that is stuck. It's an entire corridor that catches a cold and a whole region that starts to shiver. That's the stage. Now let's go to the scene that lit the match. The night at the checkpoint, trop c'est trop. Let's go to Wednesday night. According to multiple local sources and videos circulating on social media, we were able to verify that here is what we can reasonably piece together. It's late around 11 p.m. on the Meiganga Garoua Boulay axis. We are at a gendarmerie checkpoint, one of those barriers every driver in Cameroon knows too well. Flashlights in the night, uniforms, papier, les pièces, où sont vos papiers, negotiations, jokes sometimes, tension, and often tracasseries. On this particular night though, a motorbike rider is stopped. There is an altercation. Witnesses say a gendarme slaps the rider. Now, in a normal healthy system, that might lead to a complaint, a sanction, or at least some kind of mediation. But on a road already saturated with frustration, in a country already boiling after a contested election and a deadly protest, that slap is not just a slap. It becomes a symbol of humiliation, of abuse at checkpoints, of a state that often appears only to control and extract, not to protect. Truck drivers nearby have seen enough. They decide, on block 2. When trucks become barricades. Now let's zoom out a bit and look at what truckers actually did. Truckers are not just individuals. On a corridor like that, they are a collective force. Dozens of heavy trucks loaded with tons of goods lined up on a narrow road. In Meiganga, they turned that force into leverage. They packed the trucks across the road. They immobilized the entire axis. Traffic is blocked completely. For one night, then into the next day. Cars, buses, even humanitarian vehicles are stuck. What are the truckers saying beyond this one slap?
Nous souffrons sur la route. Nous payons les impôts, tous les péages, nous nous arrêtons. Il n'y a même pas la route. Et nous avons encore des molestations des gendarmes et des policiers.
They are saying we are tired of being milked at every checkpoint. We are tired of being treated like criminals while we keep this country and this region alive. We are tired of uniforms that think the road is an ATM. And here is where the Meiganga story becomes extraordinary. Reports say the gendarmes were forced to dismantle their own checkpoint. Yes, the same barrier they've been using for years to control, fine, and sometimes harass drivers. Imagine that picture. The armed state taking down its own barrier under pressure from unarmed but organized economic actors. That is not nothing. That is a small earthquake in the psychology of power. Let's talk about local authorities and traditional leaders, the Lamido, the army, and the tension in the air. But the story doesn't end with a dismantled barrier. On the ground, tension remains high. Some accounts say on the Ngaoundéré Meiganga stretch, trucks are stopped deliberately. Some drivers allegedly remove their license plates. Others reportedly release cattle from certain trucks. A way of saying, we are not moving, we are not cooperating. we are waiting to see what happens next. And of course, when situations like this prevail, things can easily go out of hand because there are claims of civilians with weapons at some spots, residents filming and describing a climate of fear, calls for authorities to intervene. Now, as informed citizens and vigilant citizens across the globe, especially even those within Cameroon, we must be honest. Some of this is confirmed by local reporting, of course, and that is why we continue to caution that it's important to stay vigilant and stay away from propaganda, because in moments like this, there's a lot and there's no shortage of propaganda out there. People circulating images and video trying to mix up the facts so that you get confused. Where it's the case, we'll make sure we tell you that it's either videos circulating online or unconfirmed reports indicate, or we just simply tell you that we are still verifying these claims. However, in the middle of all this, another actor appears, the Lamido of Meiganga. Local sources describe how the Lamido offered 2 bulls to the truckers, a traditional symbol, a way of saying, let's talk, let's eat, let's step back from the brink. And this is important because when the formal state is seen as abusive or absent, traditional authorities are called to mediate, to pour oil on troubled waters, sometimes literally. And then, behind the scenes, there are reports of an army deployment, reinforced security, quiet but tense negotiations about how to reopen the corridor without igniting a bigger fire. And of course, Meiganga is not an accident, it's a mirror. Now, let's stop and breathe for a second. Ask yourself, why did this confrontation happen here and now? It's not random. Meiganga sits at the crossroads of at least 4 big fault lines in Cameroon. Number 1, an economic corridor under pressure. Overloaded trucks, bad roads, wait stations, checkpoints where lawful control and unlawful racketeering often mix. Transporters who risk their lives and trucks every day. Number 2, security and banditry. The wider East Adamawa North Belt has issues with cattle theft and road banditry. Security forces are present, but their behavior is often contested. Number 3, refugees and humanitarian flows. Thousands of people fleeing violence in the Central African Republic pass through and live around Meiganga. This means UN agencies, NGOs, convoys of aid, and again, checkpoints. And last but not least, number 4, political tension after a disputed election. Nationwide protests. So many people dead, reports suggest above 50. Documented by human rights groups. Calls for days of mourning, ville morte, civil resistance. A population that feels unheard, unprotected, and sometimes provoked. And the death of a key opposition figure. And of course, a disputed autopsy with the family. And many other things. So Meiganga is not a small local story. It is a mirror of how power behaves on the road, of how people push back when they have no other tools, of how far the social patience of a country can be stretched. Now, let's look at Meiganga and the wider resistance. Let's link this to the bigger national picture. In the last weeks, we've seen protests across Cameroon after the presidential election, highly contested, disputed. Issa Bakari is still in the Gambia, at least for the last report that we have, and considered being on exile, whereas he has claimed the victory of that election. Those within the country continue to clamor for his reinstatement or return to the country, at least so he can march to a 2D and take power. And the people, in some cases, have been arrested, detained because of their opinion, and those that marched have been called criminals, assailants, drug addicts, and so on by surrogates of the regime. Ministers in office have not held their tongue back in accusing opposition figures, as being instigators of violence. And while those who have lost loved ones try to mourn and decide on how to bury their dead, there is also a call for a national day of mourning by resistance leaders, with markets and streets going quiet in several towns, including Meiganga. These are events that have shaped the last couple of weeks in Cameroon. A growing disconnect between official narratives and what people live on the ground. And to that, the death of Anicet Ekane, the controversial presence and absence of key political figures, social media that no longer waits for CRTV to give the headline. In that context, what does a roadblock in Meiganga mean? It means a few things. It means economic actors are no longer just complaining in private, they are interrupting the flow. It means people are linking daily humiliation like a slap at a checkpoint with bigger political injustices. Is every trucker a militant of X or Y movement? No. But every trucker knows the system is not working, and without us, nothing moves. And that is a powerful realization. Now, let's turn to the human side beyond headlines. Let's humanize this a bit. Behind every truck in that line, there is a driver who hasn't slept, a family waiting for money, a risk of accidents, attacks, and mechanical breakdown. Behind every refugee convoy trying to bypass the incident, there is a child who fled war twice, a mother whose future depends on an NGO truck arriving on time. Behind every uniform at that checkpoint, there is also a human being who might be badly paid, badly trained, sometimes badly commanded. A system that has normalized extortion as survival instead of building a professional, accountable force. So when we cover Meiganga, we're not just covering truckers versus gendarmes or Lamido versus tension. We are covering a fragile ecosystem where a single slap can stop the trade route, shake humanitarian operations, and add another crack on the legitimacy of the state. And here are questions we must ask as citizens, not just spectators. So what do we do with all this? As citizens, as people in the media, as members of the diaspora, as Cameroonians home and abroad, we have to ask hard but honest questions. On state behavior, how many checkpoints on that corridor are actually legal, necessary, and transparent? What sanctions exist for abuses by security forces? Who audits these checkpoints? On economic justice, how much money do truckers lose to illegal payments every trip? How does that affect the price of food, fuel, and basic goods across the region and the country? On political responsibility, in a post-election crisis, do authorities understand that every abuse is combustible? Do those calling for resistance also have a plan to protect life, property, and humanitarian access? On local leadership, what role can traditional leaders like the Lamido of Meiganga play beyond symbolic gestures? Can they mediate durable agreements between truckers, security forces, and the administration? I know some of these questions may sound very lofty because, as someone told me a few minutes ago, that sometimes my analysis sounds as though I'm talking about a country where the rule of law is respected and everything is functioning properly. But when it comes to Cameroon, when it is believed that almost nothing functions according to the rule of law, or as we like to call it, international business standards, it turns out that some of these things, they sound far-fetched. But we should remember one thing though: Cameroon cannot become emergent, cannot become a country that can be compared to other advanced economies without having some of these basic things in place. Therefore, whether we think it's possible, it's feasible, it's doable, or these are lofty ideas, one thing remains: Cameroon cannot emerge without passing through these stages. And that is what we're seeking for the Cameroon of tomorrow. That starts today. And that is why it's important for us to go that far. Some of you across the globe using credit cards to do your purchases and your payments. You find it is a beautiful thing. You can just shop online and things are delivered at your doorstep. You know, you turn on the tap, water flows, easy. You have your constant electricity. You can produce content from the comfort of your home. You can do lots of things because some basic necessities are already there in place, fixed. Have you ever wondered how these other countries arrived at that point? It may take how long it would take, but the only way Cameroon will emerge is to get to that level. There are other African countries, and for tourism purposes, we can really advertise because they are making improvements and progress, getting towards that direction. It is not impossible. Cameroon may just lack the will because there are leaders in place who have no business being in those places. They see things in other countries, they visit, they go there for medical treatment. They even send their children to go study in these countries. And they go there for vacation. And they even invest and have their biggest assets in those countries. And yet, they don't sit and think for a second that they, in their position of authority and their office that they hold, they are contributing in impoverishing their own country, in depleting the resources of their own country, of ruling with impunity and forgetting that the society would not change by a magic wand. It would take conscious efforts and meaningful and precise governance. And that is not a lofty idea. It's a must. And there's no way we can go around it. And therefore, in closing, let's talk about calm resistance with clear eyes. Let's land this plane. Because Meiganga is a warning. It's a small town whispering a big truth. You cannot run a country forever on intimidation, humiliation, checkpoints, and fear. At some point, people block the road. People say no more. People use the little power they have, their trucks, their shops, their presence to push back. Our responsibility in doing some of this analysis and bringing you these editorials as citizens, as good people of goodwill, those lovers of democracy, is not to exaggerate, is not to minimize, but to clarify, to say clearly what is confirmed, what is still unverified, where the regime is responsible, where our own movements must stay disciplined. So as you listen to stories from Meiganga, from your relatives on the ground, from bloggers, from NGOs, from local journalists, ask yourself, what does this say about the way power is used in Cameroon? What kind of resistance protects life instead of multiplying funerals? How do we build a country where a simple checkpoint is a place of safety, not fear? That is the conversation Meiganga is forcing on us. And of course, thank you for watching, thank you for thinking, and for sharing this content far and wide within your circles. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to hit that like button and leave your comments. If you're in Meiganga, along that corridor, or you drive those trucks, your testimonies matter. Send them in, audio, video, written, and we'll continue to fact check, to listen, and to speak with clarity. Until next time, take special care of yourself. Take care of your neighbor. Keep your eyes wide open. Stay vigilant. Stay away from propaganda. And until the next one, may God bless Cameroon.